Available now for the first time in decades. This is really cool. Exclusively on adfreeshows.com, fans are able to listen to the interview archives from the Wrestling with Jim Ross radio show with the release of Studio Sessions with Jim Ross. Hey, long before he was a recognized Hall of Famer and before his current role as senior advisor and lead announcer for All Elite Wrestling at AEW, Ross manned the radio airwaves and hosted Wrestling with Jim Ross, the hour-long program that ran on WSB Radio in Atlanta on Sunday nights from 1991 to 93, gave listeners an inside view to the world of wrestling and had a who's who of wrestling legends as guests. I remember in South Florida, because you didn't have all this technology and you didn't have podcasts and all these things going on, it was hard to find wrestling news and information. I would try to listen on my car radio. If it was a good night in South Florida, I might be able to pick it up. Sometimes I did. It was really cool to listen to, and these shows are great. And thank you so much, Jim Ross. Hey, what was just the thought of bringing these back to life?
Well, I had an idea to do a radio show. I thought there was a void there. Fans wanted more than just what they got on television. It might be challenging for audiences today to comprehend that, but, like you said, there was no social media. There were no podcasts. There was no audio opportunities to engage in what most of us love. So I was doing Falcon football on WSB during that time and got to know the station management well. And I just casually pitched an idea. And Sunday night at 9 o'clock was kind of a wasteland. I said, why don't we try it? So they bartered, they gave me the time and a few minutes to sell ads so I could make a couple of bucks if possible. So that's kind of how we launched it. And it was easy getting guests, but the show was primarily driven by callers. And so I enjoyed the heck out of it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I hope fans will check it out and enjoy these shows, because there's some classic stuff on there that you never heard before. Probably, and some of them obviously because of death, unfortunately, you'll never hear again. So I'm very excited that Conrad finally got acquisition to all those shows. And we've got 2 years worth, so check them out if you can, folks. I think you'll have fun if you're an old school wrestling fan or like a wrestling historian type person. I think you're gonna really like them.
And I think too, what's cool about this is because of social media and the ability to look back, even the younger generation, the ability to look back and find information on old school, older wrestlers. This gives them a new opportunity to listen to them.
Yeah, I think so. It's just a source of information that previously has been unavailable to all of us. I haven't heard those shows since I did them. My friend Dennis Brent, who worked with us in Atlanta and in Connecticut, he recorded all those shows when we were all living in Atlanta. So he was I didn't ever understand why he wanted to record every show, but he was a fan and a friend, and so he recorded every one of them. That's how we found them. I knew Dennis had them, but Dennis is battling MS, and his health has been sketchy. So I never really pushed it back. Can you find these shows, and can we work out some sort of arrangement that we can have access to them and air them? And he was, once he got feeling better, he did what he needed to do, and so now they're available. So we just started; those just dropped like a week or so ago. So we're just getting in the hunt on it. So if you haven't listened, or if you hadn't heard them previously, probably a lot of them haven't, because of the 91, a lot of guys weren't even born that are fans now. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with them.
And they're available on adfreeshows.com. And JR, when you listen back to 91 and 93 and some of the shows, what goes through your mind of how you evolved since then and how you did those shows? And do you even, if you listen to any of them, do you think like, oh man, I should have said that or should have done this, or you go past that?
I think that every week, to this very day, I'm a very harsh critic of my own work. And so, without a doubt, I listen back to the little previews I've heard. You can get a little cringe in you because you say, well, like you said, I should have followed up with this, or I should have said that, or I should have laid out there, or whatever. So, I don't like hearing my work. I always think I could do better, and this is no exception. But it's still fun. It's still fun because I know the fans really enjoyed it, and we used to have this technique or this procedure where you can tell how many calls you're getting or people trying to call in, and our calls we were led. Our lead-in was the Georgia football coaches show during football season, and we would always get more calls from wrestling fans than the station got for Georgia football, and they were the flagship station for Georgia football. So I thought it was a good idea. The management had confidence in the concept, and the only reason I quit doing them was I went to work for WWE, and the logistics just weren't going to work out, and so that was a regret, but it was inevitable. It had to be done. But again, it's one of my fun times in my career. So I was doing wrestling on TBS. I was doing Atlanta Falcon football on Sundays, and traveling with the team, with away games, all that good stuff. So so I had a lot of irons in the fire, shall we say. But I enjoyed those times. Everything I was doing, I really loved. And like the old saying goes, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And even though I had a heck schedule, on those Sundays, I had to get around. If we did an away game, and we got back in town before 9 o'clock, I went straight from the plane to the radio station. And the days that I couldn't make it, or it's questionable, my friend Tony Schiavone would sit in for me, and he'd earn a payday. So it was a great time. I enjoyed being busy. I still enjoy being busy and doing what I do now. I'm having probably as good a time as I've had, I don't know, maybe ever in pro wrestling. Because I'm working in a company that's just very positive. I got the same deal here as AEW as I had with WWE. I have a direct line of communication to the owner. And so I don't have to worry about getting an answer from 3 or 4 people. I ask one guy. And so Tony Khan is an extremely learned fan, and as mid-30s, he thinks differently. I learn things from him, and he's great at using data and research to our advantage as far as what's placed where on the shows. So I'm having the time of my life, adding this rediscovered element from the early 90s is, I think, going to be a blast.
Well, JR is busy to this day, and he's also has his own podcast, so that's very cool. And you mentioned a couple things, and it's interesting because I was going to ask you about the radio show and why it ended, and you said because then you went to WWE. JR, did you ever pitch doing a radio show while with WWE?
Absolutely, we did one for a while. But it was just wrong place, wrong time. We got out of our element, and then all of a sudden you find that you got a whole lot on your plate. I just moved from Atlanta. I love living in Atlanta. I just moved, and a lot of changes going on. But yeah, Vince was not. He was willing to try it, and he enjoyed it. But when we had to increase our infrastructure. We had to get radio people involved. We had to go outside our envelope to outsource it. It wasn't as convenient as walking into the radio station in Atlanta and sitting down
Well, that time, wrong place, wrong time. But there are many times it's been right place, right time for Jim Ross. And it's interesting because studio sessions with Jim Ross, which you could hear at adfreeshows.com, some of the industry icons like Ric Flair, Jesse Ventura, and conversations with wrestling royalty who has since passed, such as Bobby the Brain Heenan, the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, Macho Man Randy Savage. It's just so cool listening back to some of those insightful interviews, good time talk, things you weren't able to get back then, where now it's more prevalent, as we mentioned, on podcasts and social media. So really it was a different time. You could listen to things like that. And JR, you mentioned it. You were getting more calls, call-ins, more response than University of Georgia football. And that's interesting to me. Was that during the Vince Dooley days? And was Vince Dooley okay with that, or was he a little jealous?
No, it was Ray Gall.
Ah!
I followed Larry Munson, the great broadcaster there. He was on the hour before me with the Georgia Coaches Show, and Ray Gall, the coach. So, no, it was just nice that the station could measure how well we were doing, how popular the show was. I feel very confident if I'd stayed in WCW and I had not left Atlanta to move to Connecticut, that we would have continued to do the radio show. It was good programming. It was building an audience. There was a proof of how well it was doing in that respect. So, but you know, it's a change of environment, change of schedule. So all of a sudden, we were doing that show on Saturdays in New York, in Connecticut, and all of a sudden you find yourself working, 6 days every week, including travel. It was just too much on the plate for me, and but anyway, it was a great experience. I think one of the most fun projects I've ever worked on in my career were these radio shows in WSB.
And it's interesting, JR, when you were younger, did you listen to a lot of sports radio growing up? And if you did, who did you listen to?
Well, there wasn't a lot of sports radio on. There were ball games on. I listened to KMOX radio in St. Louis and listened to Jack Buck, Harry Carey, and all those greats.
Oh, wow.
Do Cardinal baseball. And on a little transistor radio with an earplug. So, but I was always a big connoisseur of audio, sports audio. Oklahoma football was a rite of passage. Just couldn't get enough of that. And I loved all the old voices on sports. The Chris Schenkels and the Ray Scott and the Kurt Gowdy. Oklahoma is known for a lot of things, but two of our former voices of Oklahoma football are Walter Cronkite and Kurt Gowdy. So the history of all that old tape and all those little highlights they used to air on TV and radio were significant to my ears. So it influenced the hell out of it. I realized it wasn't the volume of words, it was the words, the individual words, and the tone and the inflection and the timing. That's what it's all about, intelligent storytelling. You can't stay at one level, you can't stay at one pace. You got to change things up and let things evolve. So, yeah, but I was a big fan of those legendary sports voices, without a doubt.
Well, gee, you mentioned Kurt Gowdy, just unbelievable back in the day for sports. And then did you mention Walter Cronkite as well?
Cronkite and Kurt Gowdy were former voices of Oklahoma football on radio.
Walter Cronkite, Mr. News. That's amazing.
Yeah, that Walter Cronkite.
I know. I just because he was the man when it came to news. I didn't even know he did Oklahoma football, but for news broadcasting, that's what I remember. Walter Cronkite. That's awesome in itself. Hey, JR, I'm wondering because obviously all different types of media. You've done medium with TV, radio, podcasting. Do you find there's a difference in how you handle each one?
Not really, it's all communications, telling a story, front-loading your sound bites, listening to the host, paying attention, but it's all the same, like those short and sweet, right to the point, as a rule. But not really the same basic traits. It's all communication. And you just got to keep telling your story and be engaging and be honest. So we just factor those things in all the time. But there's some little nuances, but nothing significant.
There are podcasts out there nowadays, a lot of good ones, interesting ones. JR, you're very busy. Do you have time to listen to any of the podcasts? Are there any ones out there that you're a fan of?
Well, I sample Conrad's podcast.
What a collection. What a team. Oh, my gosh. And you're part of that.
Yeah, he's put together an all-star team there with the adfreeshows.com. I don't know how you could be a wrestling fan. I'm being very serious. A true wrestling fan and not at least sample at the adfreeshows.com roster and menu, shall we say. It's just cool as hell. And we do things, special projects. We had a thing called After Hours the other day we did, kind of on a whim. Conrad, Eric, Bischoff, Schiavone, and myself went to an Airbnb that Conrad had rented and taped about a 2-hour just big bull session. And we had a few cocktails, we had some food, just a bunch of guys sitting around a table having a friendly cocktail and telling stories. And it was received amazingly well. And so we're probably going to do some more of those. But Conrad's always thinking, he and his team has grown tremendously. And got some really talented people working in those areas. So we're going to continue to add new programming. The wrestling fans always want new. They want something different, something unique, and that keeps them interested, keeps them invested. So we're going to give our fans that listen to our podcast exactly what they want: fresh material every week. So, like I said, my show drops every Thursday, and we're over 100 episodes in. So it's been a blessing to hook up with Conrad and his team, and we're building another business. I'm working with Tony Khan to help build the AEW business, at least in my role. And now Conrad's giving me the opportunity to get involved creatively, as not only as a talent, but as a producer. So I'm enjoying my life right now. Sometimes I have to pinch myself, so to speak, to make sure it's real. Life is good. The books are selling well. The Black Adam maybe made it to a movie or some sort of made-for-television type film. They're talking about that. I'm kind of out of that loop. My agent and other people are involved in that. But it's looking promising, as promising as those deals get. So, and then I'm talking about getting back with Paul O'Brien, my writing partner, and going for book 3. So we're just talking about creative concepts and what we want the book to resemble. How do we start this third book and how do we end it? Because we can fill out the middle. It's like doing a wrestling match. How do you want to start? What is the
Well, it's interesting. You're busy and you're happy, and a lot of wrestling fans and people are happy because we get to listen to new content, new stuff, new things you're doing, books. I mean, the Stories From Tab, that's growing because you keep doing more, so you have more content too to add for a book, and it's just great. And the podcast, Grillin' JR with Jim Ross, with Conrad Thompson, and you mentioned Conrad, I mean, working with Bruce Pritchard on a podcast, Eric Bischoff, Tony Schiavone, Arn Anderson, Kurt Angle, new one, Jeff Jarrett now, My World with Jeff Jarrett. Got to speak to Jeff about that. And of course, yours, Grillin' JR with Jim Ross. It's just, what a collection, what a team. Just amazing. And you mentioned AEW, and I do want a couple questions I want to ask you about AEW because I read something yesterday. I was so glad about this. AEW Dynamite on TNT, going back on the road. First show on the road, July 7th, will be right here in Miami, James L. Knight Center, a place we all in Miami know well. What are your thoughts of AEW being able to continue in Jacksonville, doing what you all were able to do during the pandemic, and now opening it back up to fans? And I know fans, you've been doing that up in Jacksonville too. This is going to be a packed show for July 7th. It's going to be a full house, but on the road, travel. Long story short, what is it like having AEW Dynamite, traveling back on the road and coming to these different locations and places?
Well, I love it because I think it's good for our brand. I think it's great for the talent to get in front of a bigger live and a different audience. You know, Daly's place in Jacksonville has become our home base. That's our home field. And we're proud of that. And we're not going to forsake and leave Daly's place altogether whatsoever. But getting back to some of these other cities is, I think, going to be a great educational experience for a lot of our talents. Look, we got a very young roster. So what if Jericho and Dustin are older? Okay, you want to pick out one or two examples, have at it. That makes you feel better. But nonetheless, we've got a lot of young guys, Jungle Boys and Darby Allin and MJF. These kids need to know what it feels like to have the audience in the palm of their hand, or at least attempt to get them there. And I think it's going to be great for their growth. I think it's going to be great for the product. And so I can't wait. I don't know how you can say you can't wait to get back to the TSA line or whatever, but I'm excited about it. I've been doing this for a long time. You don't get too high or too low with travel. You can't control it. But I think it's going to be good for our brand. I think it's going to be really good for our team, and it's going to make the talents improve their game and get better at what they do. I think that's very important.
You know what else, JR? A couple more questions. I am going to let you go, and I appreciate your time as always. You're always so insightful, and I'm very humbled that you're able to do this. I really mean that. I want to ask, when NXT moved from Wednesday nights to Tuesday nights, I was very happy. I don't care who moved. I just thought it was better overall because as you see, AEW ratings increased and NXT ratings increased too. I was just happy for that aspect of it because you had some fans that were going back and forth and you could watch it different ways at different times. I understand that. But for that number, I was just glad to see that. Is that something you look at too, or that's really not your take on it from that standpoint, or not really concerned with it that from that standpoint?
Well, I'm always for things that make it more, our product in general, more fan friendly. We can't take our eye off what is a really important aspect and the commodity of fan support. And I think that's something that's very, very important. You can't live without it, that's for damn sure. You got to have it, that's for damn sure. So anything that makes it more fan-friendly, I think, is a good thing. And by WWE moving off of Wednesdays into Tuesdays, made it easier and better on the fans. So to me, it was a win-win for everybody involved. I mean, it was obvious. WWE goes on Wednesdays head-to-head against us in hopes that it would retard our growth. And that didn't happen. And I think probably they got tired of getting their ass beat every week, pretty much. And so what are you going to do? They had a lot of stroke with USA and NBC Universal. So they made a move. I think it helped everybody. I think it helped them. They have more viewers watching their show now. We have more viewers watching our show now. And the fans don't have to make a decision or DVR this or flip back and forth and all those things. So if it's fan-friendly, and I think this move was fan-friendly, I think it's a good move because we have to protect our greatest assets, and that are the people that watch the shows, buy the tickets, buy the merch, all those things, listen to the podcast, wherever it may be. So win-win for me.
Yeah, I think it's win-win too. I totally agree with that and all. And you guys did very well head-to-head with them. That was really amazing to see, I think, when you're looking at that. Lastly, I love these shows, JR, AEW Elevation, AEW Dark, chance to see Monday, Tuesday nights on AEW YouTube, some indie talent mixed in with some veteran talent, some younger talent that's on the show as well, and AEW Dynamite that mixed in as well. And you got Paul Wight now with Tony Schiavone with AEW Elevation, and Paul is former WWE Big Show, and he's now transitioning to broadcasting. He hasn't ruled out wrestling again. And I'm just, a couple things there. Your thoughts on those type of shows. By the way, two different shows, JR. AEW Dark with Taz and Excalibur seems more, a little bit funny. They're just, hey, you guys free, say whatever you want. Just have some fun with this show. Where AEW Elevation with Tony and Paul is more, hey, this is business. We're gonna have a little bit of fun, but we want to tell a story more here and be a little more serious. That's the way I'm looking at the two shows. But really, two cool shows. Just your thoughts on the shows. And Paul.
Well, the talents all need more reps. Without the support of the live events and being on the road doing non-televised live events, it lessens the reps that the talents are provided. Now, a guy like Chris Jericho doesn't need extra reps, but a guy like Jungle Boy or Darby Allin, among others, MJF, all those guys, they're young, they're still evolving and growing. They need more reps. They need to get in the ring as often as they can, and this provides that. So, and it also allows us to look in a live game situation at some of these younger kids and see who might have it and who might, that we might be, I don't say overlooking, but they haven't been discovered yet, so to speak. So I think it serves a lot of masters. The YouTube thing's pretty easy to access. Even a guy like me can access YouTube. IP friendly, but nonetheless, I can damn sure get on YouTube. But I think it's a good thing. It just provides more opportunities for these men and women to work in front of a live audience more often than not, or occasionally anyway. But and I'm wondering how it's going to be when we go on the road and we start taping some of these things on the road on these Wednesdays, I'm assuming. And it'll be good for everybody. More practice is good. Practice is good, and that's what some of our young talents really need is more in-ring work to work on their personas, their timing, their storytelling. And these two shows give you a good opportunity to do that. And you got two different announce teams, two different philosophies, and those shows are entertaining in their own way. Taz and Excalibur may have more tongue-in-cheek stuff and more lightheartedness at times. But sometimes they're taping those shows at midnight. So, and they've been there all day. So they're a little giddy. That's all right. And then Big Show, like Paul Wight, is, he's trying to find himself in a new area. And he's a smart guy. He's got a great partner. Schiavone's worked with them all. Been around forever. And so he's got a great mentor to help him along with his broadcast. So we have a lot of wins out of those two shows. I'm glad we're doing them. And it may lead to something else on TNT someday. You just never know. If we continue to do well on Wednesdays, they like what they're seeing on those Mondays or Tuesdays. Who knows how that could
And I'll say this, JR, those shows also, Red Velvet was able to make a name for herself there, and now as part of the AEW team, it's also for some indie talent, it may be a stepping stone to get with AEW. And you mentioned that how they're going to set it up now, what's the future going to look like, because the touring of AEW Dynamite Wednesdays, we might be able to see more indie talent from other places further away, because the show will be traveling now. So if they're traveling to Texas, we might see some indie talent from Texas on those shows and things like that. I don't know either how it's going to be set up, but when you mentioned that, that's what clicked in my mind for that. Well, I'll end it with this, JR. I thank you so much for taking the time. And, I mean, everyone should try to check out Studio Sessions. It's going to be really cool on adfreeshows.com. Listening back to those radio shows from 91 and 93 and just some of the interesting banter, the legends that were on those shows. Really a cool thing. And I'll wrap it up with this, JR. I don't know, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and say this. For some reason in AEW, I'm thinking that JR is a big fan of Jake Hager and is always cheering for this guy. Am I right on that? Maybe some of the background with Jake in his college days?
Oh, yeah. He spent a lot of time in my living room, back in the day. He was my hero, Danny Hodges, someone at Perry, Oklahoma. He was a two-sport guy at OU, four-time All-American in wrestling. He was just, I've known him since he was a pup. So I take a special interest, and I'll just be transparent. He's one of my favorites. He's sentimental. He used to go over to eat my wife's cooking, and another football player that played with, Dusty Dvorak, is now a broadcaster for ESPN. But he played for the Bears for, I think, 5 years. So, a defensive tackle. So they were both in the principal's office a couple of times. So I was their sanctuary. My wife, Dad, and I were, because they come over to hear my dissertation sometimes, but they also came for cooking. And so I've got a close bond with him, and just wanting to do nothing but great things. And the better he gets, the better the brand gets, quite frankly. And by the way, Jim, I don't know if we've got some new stuff on. I got this little website called jrsbbq.com, and we're selling barbecue sauces, ketchup, mustard, chipotle ketchup, jalapeno honey mustard, seasoning, beef jerky, and all the books. And we have offers on there that we do personalized autographs. So it makes a great Father's Day gift or birthday gift for the wrestling fan. I will describe anything that's quasi-civil and not too crap on your book. So I'm enjoying that too. Building another business. I like building businesses. And jrbbq.com is the best.
Well, you've been doing very well. You're very good at building businesses and building brands, and just wrestling fans, everyone just enjoys your work and what you do, and that's great. Hey, maybe you could get Jake to get on there and do a little promoting. Maybe a picture of him trying the barbecue sauce, or a little video of him with some of the sauces or different things. Maybe he could do that for you.
I'm sure he would, and I'm good at it.
Well, listen, thank you so much, JR, as always. All the best to you. We look forward to see y'all down here in Miami as well on July 7th. Thank you.
You bet, Jimbo. Take care of yourself. Thank you for having me on.